The sound of a perfect shot echoed through the elite shooters club, followed by thunderous applause from wealthy patrons dressed in designer shooting gear. Blake Radcliffe lowered his custom Remington, a smirk spreading across his tan face as the target showed another bullseye. This was his kingdom, a world where money, power, and skill created an impenetrable barrier between the elite and everyone else. If you've ever been underestimated or made to feel invisible, you might want to stay for what happened next. The moment that changed everything at America's most prestigious shooting range. Hardy Thomas stood near the entrance, clutching his worn canvas bag, his simple work jacket and well-worn jeans making him stick out like a dandelion in a rose garden. At 45, he was neither young enough to turn heads nor successful enough to command respect in this circle. The receptionist, a young woman with immaculate blonde hair and a practiced smile, looked up, then immediately backed down, as though Hardy were merely a distraction. "Excuse me," Hardy said softly. "I'd like to register for today's open practice session." The receptionist glanced up again, this time allowing her gaze to travel from Hardy's scuffed boots to his practical, no-nonsense haircut. "Membership cards only," she replied dismissively. Hardy took a deep breath, pulling out a crinkled envelope. "I have a day pass." It was a gift. Blake noticed the newcomer from across the room. At 42, he was at the peak of his career, 5-time national champion, Olympic gold medalist, and the face of Remington's premium line. His family's oil fortune had given him access to the best training since childhood, and his natural talent had done the rest. "Well, well," Blake drawled loudly. "Looks like someone took a wrong turn on the way to the construction site." His companions laughed on cue, drawing more attention to Hardy, who was making his way to the basic range, his gaze steady and focused. Rebecca Johnson, the club's manager and a former competitive shooter herself, frowned at Blake's comment but said nothing. Hardy found a spot at the far end of the basic range. He carefully placed his canvas bag on the small shelf and withdrew a cloth-wrapped package. With practiced movements, he unfolded the material to reveal a standard Glock 19. Serviceable, but nothing like the custom pieces the club members wielded. Blake and his friends had migrated closer, their interest piqued by the opportunity for entertainment. $10 says he can't hit the target, one joked. Blake scoffed. "Make it $10,000. I bet he's never held a gun in his life." Blake sauntered over to Hardy's station. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his false politeness dripping with condescension. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This isn't a weekend hobby." "Range." Hardy finally looked up, his weathered blue eyes meeting Blake's with a quiet strength that momentarily threw him off balance. "I'm just here to practice," he said quietly. Blake recovered quickly. "Practice, pal? This is a place for serious shooters. $10,000 says you can't hit the bullseye from 50 yards. Hardy's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "I don't have that kind of money," he replied. Blake's smile widened. "If by some miracle you make the shot, I pay. If you miss, you leave and never come back. Deal?" Rebecca had approached during the exchange, concern evident. "Mr. Radcliffe, perhaps we should let our guest practice in peace." Blake waved her off without looking. "Stay out of this, Rebecca. We're just having a friendly wager." Hardy's gaze dropped to his left wrist, where a simple braided leather wristband was intertwined with a thin silver band. He touched it once, a gesture so small that only the most observant would have noticed. "All right," he said quietly. Blake's eyebrows shot up in surprise before his face settled into a triumphant smirk. "Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a show." No one noticed the subtle shift in Hardy's posture as he picked up his Glock, his spine straightening, shoulders relaxing, feet shifting into a perfectly balanced stance. No one recognized the expert grip and the controlled breathing pattern, and no one realized that the braided leather wristband on his wrist was a silent tribute to a band of brothers, and the silver band beneath it once belonged to a man who was one of the most legendary snipers in SEAL Team 6 history. 3 years earlier, Hardy had stood under a gray April sky, the crisp snap of the Honor Guard's rifles cutting through the solemn silence of Arlington National Cemetery. The folded American flag pressed against his chest felt impossibly heavy as he watched his friend's casket being lowered into the ground. Master Chief Nathan Miller had served his country for 15 years, his exceptional skills as a sniper earning him both medals and the respectful nickname The Ghost among his peers. The official report cited a helicopter crash during a classified mission. Hardy knew better. There were aspects of Nathan's death that would remain redacted forever. They had met years ago, in a dusty training camp far from home. Hardy, a quiet, unassuming mechanic attached to a special operations unit, and Nathan, the legendary sniper. An unlikely friendship forged in the crucible of shared danger and quiet competence. Hardy had a knack for fixing anything, and Nathan a knack for seeing things others missed. "You got a good eye, Hardy," Nathan had said one day, watching Hardy work on a piece of equipment, and steady hands. What began as a shared respect for skill evolved into something more, a shared activity that gave Hardy insight into Nathan's world. Nathan, seeing Hardy's quiet focus and steady hands, had taken him under his wing at the range during downtime. "If I'm going to be away so much," Nathan had explained, adjusting Hardy's stance with gentle hands, "I want to know the people I care about can protect themselves." What began as a safety measure evolved into something more, a shared activity that deepened their bond. Nathan turned out to be a patient instructor, and Hardy an unexpectedly gifted student. "You're a natural," Nathan had said the first time Hardy hit a bullseye. "You've got the three things that make a great shooter: steady hands, perfect vision, and the ability to stay calm under pressure." Over the next few years, whenever their paths crossed back home, they would practice together. Nathan taught him everything: proper stance, breathing control, sight alignment, trigger discipline. "Shooting isn't about aggression," he would explain. "It's about absolute control over your body, your breath, your fear." Hardy absorbed every lesson, finding unexpected peace in the ritual. Those sessions at the range were sacred moments of connection that didn't require words. Sometimes his SEAL teammates would join them. "Boss never shuts up about your progress," one of them, Michael Reeves, had confided. "Says you're a better natural shot than half the guys he's trained." The last time they went shooting together was 2 days before he left for his final mission. Nathan had been unusually quiet, more focused on watching Hardy than improving his own shots. "Promise me something," he said, his voice rough against Hardy's ear. "Promise me you'll keep practicing even when I'm not here." Hardy had nodded, not understanding the gravity behind his request. After the funeral, Hardy couldn't bring himself to visit a range. Nathan's guns remained locked in there, safe, untouched. He moved to Boston for a fresh start, taking a position as a lead mechanic at a large firm where no one knew him as the friend of a fallen SEAL. Until last week, when a package arrived from Michael Reeves containing a day pass to the Elite Shooters Club and a handwritten note. "Nathan would want you to keep your promise. 3 years is long enough to grieve alone. Come back to the living, Hardy." Now standing in the Elite Shooters Club with Blake Radcliffe's challenge hanging in the air, Hardy felt something stir within him, a spark of the person he had been before grief hollowed him out. As he lifted the Glock, muscle memory took over. The world narrowed to 3 points: himself, the gun, and the target. Hardy took a deep breath, held it for a moment, then slowly exhaled halfway and squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, crisp and clean. In the hushed range, through the settling echo, the mechanical whir of the target retrieval system seemed unnaturally loud. Blake maintained his amused expression, though uncertainty crossed his features as he noted Hardy's textbook stance. The target moved slowly, toward them, building suspense with each mechanical click. When the paper target finally arrived, a perfect hole marked the dead center of the bullseye. The silence that followed was profound, a vacuum of sound where Blake and his entourage struggled to process what they were seeing. Hardy calmly placed the Glock on the counter, his expression unchanged. Blake snatched the target, examining it closely. "Beginner's luck," he finally declared, his voice carrying a sharp edge. "Anyone can get lucky once." Rebecca stepped forward, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine admiration. "That was an exceptional shot, Mr. Thomas." "Hardy Thomas," Hardy supplied quietly. Rebecca nodded, offering a smile that was both apologetic and impressed. "Mr. Thomas, perhaps you'd like to try our advanced range facilities. Clearly you're not a beginner. Before Hardy could respond, Blake interjected, "Hold on. One lucky shot doesn't make him a pro. Let's see if he can do it again. This time with real stakes." An uncomfortable murmur ran through the growing crowd of spectators. $50,000, Blake announced, pulling his checkbook from his jacket pocket. "If you can hit 3 bullseyes in a row at 75 yards, if you miss even one, you publicly admit you cheated and leave." Senator Williams placed a cautioning hand on Blake's shoulder. "Blake, perhaps this isn't the time." Blake shrugged off the touch. "What's the matter? Afraid your little trick won't work 3 times in a row?" Hardy considered simply walking away. He had come today only because of his promise to Nathan not to engage in public spectacles. But something in Blake's dismissive arrogance awakened a dormant fire within him. A sense of injustice, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been underestimated or excluded. "I'll take your challenge," Hardy said softly. "On one condition. If I win, the $50,000 goes to the Veterans Support Foundation." Blake hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Fine, it's not like you'll win anyway." As Hardy moved to the 75-yard mark, Rebecca approached him. "Mr. Thomas, you should know that Mr. Radcliffe holds the club record at this distance. No one has beaten his score in 5 years." Hardy nodded, appreciating the warning. "Thank you for your concern, Miss Johnson, but I'll be fine." Rebecca studied him, noting the quiet confidence that seemed at odds with Hardy's unassuming appearance. Blake was making a show of the event now. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the substantial crowd, "we are about to witness either the most impressive fluke in shooting history or the most embarrassing failure. 3 bullseyes at 75 yards with a standard handgun. Impossible for an amateur." Hardy loaded fresh magazines methodically as he prepared. Memories of Nathan's lessons filtered through his mind. When the pressure is on, he had told him, fall back on your training. Let your body remember what your mind might forget under stress. The range had gone completely silent, all attention focused on the confrontation unfolding. For the first shot, Hardy took slightly longer to aim, adjusting to the increased distance. The crack of the gun was followed by another perfect hit. Blake's jaw tightened visibly. The second shot came more quickly, with Hardy adjusting his stance minutely before firing. Another bullseye. Before taking the third shot, Hardy touched the silver band on his wrist once, feeling Nathan's presence as strongly as if he were standing beside him. The final shot split the air and hit dead center again. Blake's face had drained of color, his expression frozen between disbelief and fury. Rebecca returned with the 3 targets, displaying them for verification. There was no question. 3 perfect shots at a distance that would challenge even experienced marksmen. "Congratulations, Mr. Thomas," Rebecca said, unable to keep the admiration from her voice. "That was remarkable." Blake snatched the targets, examining them with increasing desperation. "This is impossible," he hissed. "No one walks in off the street and shoots like this. He must have rigged something." Hardy remained calm, though steel entered his voice. "I believe we had an agreement, Mr. Radcliffe." "Agreement with a cheater." Blake's voice rose. "I'm not paying $50,000 based on some trick," Rebecca intervened. "Mr. Radcliffe, Mr. Thomas's performance was witnessed by dozens of members, including Senator Williams. The shots were legitimate." Blake rounded on her, his finger jabbing the air inches from her face. "Know your place, Rebecca. One word from me to the board and you're finished here." The threat silenced Rebecca, but her expression hardened. Hardy watched the exchange with quiet intensity. "If you're accusing me of cheating," Hardy said evenly, "perhaps we should move this discussion to a more private setting." Blake misinterpreted his intent. "Private, so you can avoid the consequences." "No, let's settle this right here." He turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I propose a real challenge. 1 week from today, a formal competition. Me versus our mystery sharpshooter. 10 stations, varying distances, with club-provided equipment to ensure everything's fair." Hardy realized he had unintentionally stepped into something much larger than a simple challenge. Part of him wanted to retreat back into anonymity, but a stronger part knew he couldn't back down. "I accept," he said quietly. "Same terms. If I win, $50,000 to the Veterans Support Foundation. Blake's smile didn't reach his eyes. Deal, and when I win, you publicly explain whatever trick you used today. As the crowd dispersed, Rebecca approached Hardy again. That was either very brave or very foolish, she said. Blake doesn't lose gracefully, and he has considerable influence here. Hardy nodded, the adrenaline fading, leaving him feeling drained. I didn't come here looking for trouble. I just wanted to practice. Rebecca studied him thoughtfully. Yet you shot like a professional. Who are you really, Hardy Thomas? Hardy gathered his belongings. Just someone keeping a promise, he replied, his voice barely audible. What neither Hardy nor anyone else knew was that Blake was already making a phone call, instructing his personal assistant to find out everything about Hardy Thomas, no matter what it takes. The tremor in his voice betrayed more than anger, it revealed fear, because Blake had recognized something in Hardy's shooting that the others had missed. The distinctive technique of military training, executed with a precision that couldn't be faked. News of the confrontation spread quickly through Boston's upper circles. By evening, Blake Radcliffe was inundated with messages from friends, rivals, and journalists, seeking details about the mysterious man who had challenged his supremacy. Seated in his penthouse overlooking the Charles River, he swirled aged scotch in a crystal tumbler, his post-victory celebration ritual now a means to calm his frayed nerves. Jessica Thompson, his girlfriend, scrolled through her phone, monitoring the social chatter with increasing concern. They're calling him the unknown marksman, Jessica reported. Someone posted a blurry video of his last shot. It's already got thousands of views. Blake drained his glass. One lucky day doesn't make him a marksman. By next week, everyone will know he's a fraud. Jessica looked up, her expression unusually serious. Blake, honey, those weren't lucky shots. I've watched you compete for years. He's good, really good. The sharp ring of his phone interrupted their conversation. Blake checked the caller ID, immediately straightening as he recognized his investigator's number. Tell me you found something, he demanded without preamble. The voice on the other end was apologetic. Not much yet, Mr. Radcliffe. Hardy Thomas, 45, works as a lead mechanic at a firm downtown. Moved to Boston from Virginia Beach 3 years ago. Clean record, pays his taxes, keeps to himself. No social media presence. No competitive shooting background. Blake's frustration mounted. That's impossible. Nobody shoots like that without training. Dig deeper. After ending the call, Blake paced the length of his living room. I don't understand. Who is he? Where did he learn to shoot like that? Jessica sat down, her phone forgotten, watching him with growing unease. Blake, maybe it's time to let this go. Pay the charity, chalk it up as an off day. Blake stopped abruptly, turning to her with an intensity that made her flinch. This isn't about the money, it's about my reputation, my legacy. Across town, Hardy sat at his kitchen table staring at his phone. Michael Reeves had called 3 times since he'd left the range. The shooting community was smaller than most people realized, especially among those with military connections. Hardy brewed a cup of coffee and carried it to his small balcony, the events of the day playing through his mind. A part of him regretted accepting Blake's challenge. The attention was unwelcome. Yet another part felt strangely liberated, as though something long dormant had awakened. Hardy's phone buzzed again, displaying an unfamiliar number. After hesitation, he answered. Mr. Thomas, this is Rebecca Johnson from the Elite Shooters. Club? Hardy tensed. Hardy Johnson, what can I do for you? Rebecca's voice carried an undertone of urgency. I probably shouldn't be calling you, but I thought you should know. Blake has people looking into your background. He's convinced you cheated somehow. Hardy closed his eyes, unsurprised, but disappointed. Thank you for the warning, Miss Johnson, but I have nothing to hide, Rebecca continued, her voice lower. Look, I don't know who you are or where you learned to shoot like that, but Blake Radcliffe has a lot of influence in this city. His family practically owns half of Boston. If he feels threatened, he can make things difficult for you. Hardy appreciated the concern, but years spent around serious people in serious situations had taught him about real threats versus intimidation tactics. I'll be careful, he promised, but I intend to honor our agreement. After the call, Hardy opened a small wooden box containing Nathan's medals, letters, and their photos from deployment. Inside, beneath the folded flag from the funeral, lay Nathan's logbook, a record of his training sessions and missions. He flipped through it, finding the pages where he had documented their practice sessions together. His handwriting was precise. Hardy, 50 yards, 9-10 bullseyes. Natural talent. Better than most recruits. The next morning, Hardy called in sick, to work for the first time in 3 years. Instead of going to the office, he drove to a public range far from elite shooters' exclusive clientele. For 8 hours, he practiced methodically, working through every technique Nathan had taught him. Each shot was a conversation with his memory, a promise kept, a connection maintained across the boundary between life and death. That evening, a text message arrived from Rebecca. Blake requesting rule changes for competition. Now wants 10 different firearms at varying distances. Board approved. Hardy understood the implication. Blake was restructuring the competition to showcase the breadth of his training and experience, areas where he might be vulnerable. Hardy's response was simple. Thank you for letting me know. No changes needed on my end. In his penthouse, Blake received the update with growing satisfaction. Perfect, he told Jessica. 10 different stations, 10 different firearms. There's no way he can match my experience across that range of weapons. Jessica set her wine glass down carefully. And if he does? Blake's smile held no warmth. He won't. But if by some miracle he gets close, I've arranged a little insurance policy. The day before the competition, Michael Reeves finally caught up with Hardy by appearing at his door unannounced. You couldn't return a call? He asked, his gruff tone belied by the concern in his eyes. Hardy let him in, relieved to see a familiar face. I've been busy, he explained simply. Michael surveyed the apartment, noting the shooting manuals spread across the table. So I've heard. The whole community's talking about you and Radcliffe. They sat across from each other at Hardy's kitchen table. Nathan would be proud, you know, not just of the shooting, of you stepping back into the world. Hardy's eyes burned suddenly with unexpected tears. I'm not sure that's what I'm doing. This wasn't planned, Michael. He nodded, understanding. The best battles rarely are, but sometimes they're exactly what we need. He reached across the table, his weathered hand covering his briefly. You're not alone in this. I've made some calls. There'll be friends in the audience tomorrow. As Michael prepared to leave, he turned back at the door. One more thing. Be careful with Radcliffe. Guy like that, with his money and connections, he's not used to losing. And he won't take it well if he does. Nathan would want you to watch your six. Hardy nodded, appreciating both the warning and the military terminology. I will. And Michael, thank you for the pass, for everything. His smile was warm. Just keeping a promise to a brother. That's what we do. Blake Radcliffe's investigation into Hardy Thomas had begun as a matter of wounded pride. By midweek, it had evolved into an obsession that consumed his attention more thoroughly than any competition preparation. The initial background check had yielded frustratingly little. No criminal record, no competitive shooting history, not even a speeding ticket. On paper, Hardy Thomas was exactly what he appeared to be, a quiet mechanic living a quiet life. Want you to focus on Virginia Beach, Blake instructed his investigator. He lived there before Boston. Check shooting clubs, gun ranges, instructors, anyone who might remember him. And that wristband he keeps touching, find out about his friend. The investigator's voice remained professionally neutral, despite Blake's increasingly demanding requests. I'll look into it, Mr. Radcliffe, but military records. I don't care what it takes, Blake interrupted sharply. The competition is in 2 days. I need information now. After ending the call, he stood before the wall displaying his most prestigious award, the Olympic gold medal from 8 years earlier. The younger Blake in the photograph beamed with genuine joy, an expression that had grown increasingly rare as success accumulated and the pressure to maintain his position intensified. The breakthrough came late that evening, as Blake was reviewing footage of Hardy's shooting form. His phone rang, displaying his investigator's number. Virginia Beach was the key, Mr. Radcliffe. Hardy Thomas was attached to a unit that worked closely with Master Chief Nathan Miller, U.S. Navy SEAL, killed in action 3 years ago. Highly decorated sniper. According to my source, Blake felt a chill run through him. A SEAL sniper's friend, are you certain? The investigator continued. Absolutely certain. Nathan Miller was known for training Hardy. Military buddies called it a hobby, but he took it seriously. One contact remembered him saying Hardy was a natural with exceptional potential. Is there anything else? Blake asked, his voice carefully controlled. Just one thing, the investigator replied. Nathan Miller had a nickname in the teams. They called him the Ghost for his ability to hit targets no one else could see. He held several unofficial long-distance records within the special operations community. Blake ended the call, sitting motionless as the implications settled over him. Hardy Thomas wasn't just lucky, and he wasn't a fraud. He was the student of a legendary military sniper, carrying on his friend's legacy. The narrative Blake had constructed of exposing an amateur's lucky streak was collapsing. Worse, the alternative narrative forming in its place was far more compelling. The friend of a fallen hero, honoring his memory through the skills he had taught him, challenging the privileged champion who had mocked him. Across town, Hardy was unaware of Blake's discovery as he focused on his own preparations. On Thursday evening, he received another call from Rebecca Johnson. Mr. Thomas, I wanted to update you on the competition details for Saturday. There's been another change. Blake has requested, and the board has approved, a modification to the scoring system. Each station will now be weighted based on difficulty, with the final station counting for 30% of the total score. Hardy absorbed this information, recognizing the strategic manipulation. Let me guess, the final station involves a firearm that Blake particularly excels with. Rebecca's hesitation confirmed Hardy's suspicion. It's a custom Macmillan TAC 338, a long-range precision rifle that Blake has exclusive experience with. It's one of only 5 in civilian hands in the Northeast. A cold light crossed his eyes, calculating the implications. He had extensive handgun training from Nathan, but significantly less experience with specialized long-range rifles. After the call, Hardy sat at his kitchen table contemplating this development. If Blake was investigating his military connections, it was only a matter of time before he discovered Nathan's identity. The next morning, Hardy drove to a specialized range outside the city, where he had arranged private access to practice with long-range rifles. As he pulled into the parking lot, he noticed a black SUV with government plates. Leaning against it was a tall man with the unmistakable bearing of special operations personnel. Mr. Thomas? Commander Wilson, former Team 3. I served with Nathan in Baghdad in 16. Hardy had met many of Nathan's colleagues over the years, though this man wasn't familiar. Commander, I don't recall Nathan mentioning you. The man's expression remained neutral. We weren't in the same squad, sir, but in the teams we all know the Ghost's reputation. He gestured toward the range. Heard you might appreciate some pointers on the Macmillan TAC 338. I have some experience with that platform. For the next 4 hours, Commander Wilson guided Hardy through the intricacies of the high-precision rifle. Nathan taught you well with handguns, he observed, as Hardy completed a series of increasingly accurate shots. You have his patience and breathing control. This isn't so different, just magnified. Trust what you know. By early afternoon, Hardy was consistently hitting targets at distances that would have seemed impossible days earlier. As they packed up, Wilson handed him a small notebook. Nathan's distance calculations and wind adjustment formulas, he developed them himself, might come in handy tomorrow. Hardy accepted the notebook with reverence. Thank you, Commander. But why are you helping me? You don't know me. Wilson's expression softened slightly. When you lose a brother in the teams, you look after what mattered to him. Nathan talked about you, how proud he was of your progress, your natural ability, said you had the calmest hands he'd ever seen on a civilian. As Wilson departed, Hardy realized that his private challenge had expanded into something larger, a representation of values that extended beyond the immediate competition. It had become a symbolic confrontation between different worlds, the privilege that Blake embodied versus the quiet excellence that Nathan had represented. Flamboyant wealth against understated service. In his penthouse that evening, Blake received the final confirmation of Hardy's connection to the legendary SEAL sniper. With each new detail, Nathan Miller's service record, his reputation within the Special Forces community, the circumstances of his death during a classified mission. Blake's confidence eroded further. He poured himself another drink, dismissing Jessica's concerned glance. "It doesn't change anything," he insisted. "Experience wins over sentiment every time." Jessica watched him with increasing unease. "Blake, maybe it's time to reconsider. Pay the charity, cancel the competition. This is becoming complicated." Blake slammed his glass down. "Cancel, and confirm every whisper that I'm afraid of him. No, tomorrow happens exactly as planned." He reached for his phone, dialing a number from memory. "It's Blake. Is everything arranged for tomorrow?" The conversation that followed was brief. After ending the call, he turned to find Jessica watching him with an expression he couldn't quite interpret. "What was that about?" she asked quietly. Blake's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just ensuring a level playing field, my dear. Nothing more." The Elite Shooters Club buzzed with unprecedented activity on competition day. The club's board had opened the event to the public, transforming a private duel into a high-profile spectacle. Inside, Rebecca Johnson supervised final preparations, noting subtle inconsistencies in the equipment at several stations. Adjustments positioned to disadvantage anyone unfamiliar with their unique characteristics. Hardy arrived dressed simply in jeans and a plain t-shirt, carrying only a small canvas bag containing Nathan's notebook. Rebecca met him privately, voice lowered. "I've completed the equipment check. There are irregularities. Nothing I can officially flag, but enough to advantage someone with intimate knowledge of these specific firearms." Hardy nodded. "Thank you for letting me know." Blake arrived, surrounded by sponsors and his entourage, dressed in logo-emblazoned gear. Approaching Hardy, his smile failed to reach his eyes. "Mr. Thomas, I trust you slept well." The subtle emphasis on his name implied he had discovered his connection to Nathan. "I should warn you, the pressure can be overwhelming for those unaccustomed to the spotlight." "No shame in withdrawing." Hardy met his gaze steadily. "I'll manage, Mr. Radcliffe. My friend taught me about performing under pressure." The competition area resembled a stadium, with digital displays showing scores and 3 certified range masters officiating. As Hardy prepared for the first station, he noticed a group of men with unmistakable military bearing seated in the back row, Michael Reeves among them. His subtle nod bolstered his resolve. Through the first stations, Blake's technique showed years of competition experience, flawless and precise. Hardy's approach was different, quieter, more economical, with a stillness between shots that spoke of intensive training. By the 4th station, Blake held a slight lead, thanks to his competition experience. At the 5th station, Hardy noticed the equipment issue. The trigger pull on the Sig Sauer was subtly heavier than standard, recalling Nathan's words, "Equipment fails, conditions change, adapt and overcome." He adjusted his stance and matched. Blake scored despite the handicap. As the competition progressed, a pattern emerged. Blake excelled with competition-style firearms, while Hardy demonstrated remarkable consistency across all platforms, particularly military-grade weapons. By the 8th station, Blake's lead had narrowed to a statistically insignificant margin. The audience grew increasingly vocal in support of Hardy, captivated by his quiet competence against Blake's showmanship. Before the 9th station, Blake approached Hardy. "Impressive performance, Mr. Thomas. Your friend would be proud. The Ghost's techniques are distinctive. I did my homework." Hardy's hands stilled momentarily at the deliberate use of Nathan's call sign, but his expression remained controlled. "Then you know he valued integrity above all else, Mr. Radcliffe. Something to consider as we finish today's competition." When the 9th station concluded, the scores were tied. The competition would be decided entirely by the final, most challenging station, the Macmillan TAC 338 at an exceptional distance. Hardy immediately noticed subtle adjustments to the scope and stock. Rather than protesting, he consulted Nathan's notebook, finding his formulas for compensating for equipment variations. Blake completed his sequence first, placing 9 of 10 shots within the innermost rings. His final score set a benchmark, requiring Near perfection from Hardy to overcome. "Not everyone is built for championship pressure," he remarked, loud enough for nearby spectators to hear. Taking position behind the rifle, Hardy felt a peculiar calmness descend. The same focused state Nathan had described from his missions. He made adjustments based on his formulas, compensating for the subtle sabotage with techniques born of combat experience. His first shots hit with perfect precision. By the sixth, all bullseyes. The audience leaned forward in collective anticipation. As he prepared his final shot, a sharp reflection of light flashed across his sightline, a momentary distraction from someone near Blake's entourage. Hardy paused, then refocused with absolute control. He sent the final round downrange with unwavering precision, a 10th consecutive bullseye that surpassed Blake's performance. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause that transformed into a standing ovation. Final results: Hardy Thomas, 1st place; Blake Radcliffe, 2nd place, Rebecca announced officially. Blake's sportsmanship mask slipped, revealing raw fury as he offered a perfunctory handshake. "This isn't over," he whispered. Hardy replied calmly, "For today it is, and I believe you owe $50,000 to the Veterans Support Foundation." Blake's facade crumbled completely. "You think this proves anything? That a military mechanic with beginner's luck can replace years of championship experience? This was nothing but a publicity stunt." His voice carried throughout the now silent room. "The equipment was rigged." "The equipment was indeed rigged, Mr. Radcliffe," Rebecca cut in, holding up her tablet displaying security footage of Blake's technical advisor tampering with the competition firearms. "But not in Mr. Thomas's favor. The club's security system records all access to the equipment room." The revelation sent shock through the audience, transforming admiration for Hardy's performance into deeper respect. Excellence achieved despite deliberate sabotage. Blake stood frozen, registering not only the loss of the competition, but the potential destruction of his reputation and career. By Sunday morning, video clips of Hardy's perfect final sequence and Blake's meltdown had spread across media platforms, transforming a niche sporting story into a broader narrative about privilege and redemption. Hardy awoke to dozens of messages from journalists and sponsors, but responded to none, making only a call to Michael Reeves. "It's gotten bigger than I expected. What do I do now?" "That depends on what you want," Michael replied. "Privacy or justice?" Hardy considered briefly. "Blake hasn't paid the donation, and the equipment tampering was fraud. There should be consequences." At the Radcliffe penthouse, Blake's crisis team strategized damage control. "We issue a statement citing extreme pressure, acknowledge a lapse. In judgment, announce a donation to veterans' causes and check into a wellness center," his publicist suggested. Blake refused. "I'm not apologizing. That man had military training. That's the real unfair advantage." Their session was interrupted by Boston police officers. "Blake Radcliffe, we need you to answer questions regarding allegations of fraud and criminal tampering. We're investigating violations of Massachusetts gaming laws since the event involved a substantial wager." Meanwhile, Hardy met with the Veterans Support Foundation's director, retired Marine Colonel James Harrison. "Several of our board members are also members of the Elite Shooters Club. They've initiated proceedings to revoke Mr. Radcliffe's championship records." Harrison then presented Hardy with an unexpected proposal. "Our foundation has been developing a marksmanship training program for veterans struggling with reintegration. The therapeutic aspects of shooting sports have shown promising results. We would be honored if you would consider taking a role in this initiative." 3 days later, Hardy reviewed the settlement offer from Blake's legal team, a $100,000 donation to the foundation, double the original amount, a public apology, and a request for a private meeting before any statements were made. That meeting took place in a neutral conference room. Blake entered with his attorney, his usual swagger diminished, designer attire replaced by a conservative business suit. "Mr. Thomas, I want to apologize for my conduct. The truth is, I've built my entire identity around being the best. When you threatened that, I reacted poorly, criminally." His rehearsed statement gave way to something more genuine. I've never faced someone who shoots for reasons beyond trophies or recognition. It was unsettling. Hardy considered his words. Mr. Radcliffe, I didn't enter that competition seeking to unsettle anyone. I was keeping a promise to my friend. Your actions undermined the integrity of a sport you claimed to respect and dishonored the charity you agreed to support. Blake nodded, genuine shame crossing his features. That's why I've increased the donation and accepted the 3-year suspension from competition. The settlement was signed, and as they prepared to leave, Blake extended his hand. For what it's worth, you're the finest shooter I've ever competed against. Your friend taught you well. Hardy accepted the handshake briefly. He would say I was already a good student. Sometimes the right teacher just helps us discover what's already there. 2 weeks later, Hardy stood in the newly established training range at the Veterans Support Foundation's Rehabilitation Center, funded by Blake's donation and contributions from manufacturers. His first class consisted of 6 veterans carrying visible and invisible wounds from their service. "Good morning," he began, his voice stronger than it had been in years. "My name is Hardy Thomas. I'm not a soldier or a champion, just someone who learned that sometimes the steadiest hands belong to those who have endured the greatest shaking. Today we begin with fundamentals: how to stand, how to breathe, how to focus." 6 months later, at the Foundation's fundraiser, Hardy addressed the gathering. "1 year ago, I walked into a shooting range for the first time in 3 years, keeping a promise to my late friend. I expected to reconnect with a skill he taught me, then return to my quiet life. Instead, I found myself in a confrontation that led to this program and the community we're building together." When the Foundation announced the annual Nathan Ghost Miller Excellence in Marksmanship Scholarship for veterans pursuing careers in shooting instruction, Hardy felt tears form as the first recipient, a former Army Ranger who had overcome significant injuries, accepted the honor. Hardy touched the silver band on his wrist one final time. "This one's for you. Continue, wait for next part."